Welcome, Jet fans. We wrap up the week 2 of the preseason, and we're going to recap some of the occurrences for this week, as well as some highs and lows for some of the players that contributed to the first week of the second week of the preseason against the Carolina Panthers. Most important thing of all, obviously, the Jets come away with a win, and come away with not much on the injury front. That's always the big thing you look for as you walk through these preseason games. Is how the backups do? They provide enough good quality film for this week's game, and did we leave the game without much injuries? And that's both check the box on both those items. Jets walk away with a 15-2 win, and they also come away with um, a healthy overall roster after this whole week's said and done. So with that, we're going to start going into the offense. And before I get going there, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It's how I'm going to grow. All your support is highly appreciated as we get closer and closer to the regular season, now standing 21 days away from that road opener in San Francisco. We'll start with the offense. Um, I think probably the most excitement here, obviously, with the running game and how those players are going to contribute that after a strong performance in week 1 of the preseason. And we start with Isaiah Davis, who got a bulk of the carries, it looks like, to start the game. And from what you can tell from this guy is that he does have that ability to kind of just stretch the runs outside. I think it was his first or second handoff of the game. He was able to kind of just like work his way to the right sideline and then just bounce it upfield for a first down. I think it was like a 9 yard gain or something like that to get the first down yardage. And he just shows that ability just to get out to the outside with some quickness and then jump upfield, get pretty lateral. Not a bunch of big plays in this game, but he does show that ability to just be that quality change of pace, third down running back type of situation. Jets need um, as many different role players as possible in this season. We obviously have our top notch running back in Brees Hall. Having a guy like Davis who can show that ability to get outside on some speed plays when Brees is not in the lineup, as well as having some power in the lineup when Braylon Allen hits the field. Braylon Allen has kind of continued on that trend of last week as well. Quality runs. He seems to be a guy that just gets yards in chunks pretty consistently. And in this last game, it wasn't much of the big chunks like we saw in that first game of the year. It was just consistently 3-4 yards, 3-4 yards. And it sounds boring and it sounds like, okay, 3 yards a carry. You look at NFL statistics, that's not the greatest measure of stats. Sure, he will get chunk plays, obviously, but when you're playing meaningful football in December, January, and then hopefully February, um, when you're playing those meaningful games, the Jets expect to be playing with a lead in a lot of these games this season, with obviously what the offense is with Aaron Rodgers, what the defense is. And in order to kind of maintain those leads, you have to have strong defense to hold the lead. But you also need to hold on to the football with the running game and grind out that clock. That's the only way it's going to happen. We've seen many situations in the past years with this team of having a good defense, but as good as that defense can play, at some point the pipe is going to burst. Defense can't just continuously stop offenses for long durations in the fourth quarter. You keep punting the ball after 3 and outs, which is what we saw a lot of, with this team in the past. You keep punting the ball after 3 and outs. Eventually, the other side of the team, the other team is going to eventually start figuring things out. Take the measurable approach of like, let's be more aggressive. Let's get these plays going. But the way you prevent that is having a good defense, getting the ball, and don't give it back as much as possible. Do not give that football back. And Braylon Allen seems like a guy who's going to contribute in a big way to that goal. We'll see how the season goes, but I'm pretty excited from what I've seen out of these two running backs, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again, hopefully in this next preseason game, and then seeing what it comes down to in real life when we start playing these real games in 21 days, as I mentioned earlier. Continuing down the line, some other excitement here. Olu Fashanu has kind of, in the first preseason game, we saw what he can contribute at left tackle. Plays a strong game there, solid in pass protection. Didn't allow much of any disturbance from that left side, at least to his account. By every means, it's what you want to see out of a 11th overall pick in his first live game action, whether it be against strong starting opponents or week or not, it's still his first game, and he's still doing his job, and he's doing it efficiently. In week 2, we got to see something a little different out of him. Now we're seeing him on the right side. Um, Obviously, Robert Saleh mentioned earlier in the week that he was going to move him over to right side. Happy that we saw him in a game to see how that contributed. And by all accounts, he's just as good on the right side. Maybe more solid left tackle. It's his natural position. It's what he played at Penn State. Um, but I don't think there's that much of a drop off moving him from left to right, and it kind of begs the question of what I've kind of mentioned earlier in the offseason is, um, Salah always preaches we want to start the best five in the front. Well, if if he's as solid as he is, and not and this is no disrespect to Morgan Moses, he's as good of a right tackle as possible too for what we have on this roster. But it's going to be very difficult as we get closer and closer to the season. If Olu is actually that player that we're kind of seeing here, it's going to be hard to keep a guy who's been held his own and pretty consistent in pass protection off the field. Um, he's still a player that the Jets would like to develop the right way, and I think that will end up being the case. He will probably be the primary backup at left or right tackle. Um, but I think it's definitely something to consider here, depending on how Moses is kind of moving along in his progression from his injury. Obviously, I know he has been practicing, but it's just definitely something to keep your eye on. With Olu is if he's as solid as he looks, especially for Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh will preach kind of starting the best five possible. If he's one of the best five, how do you not start him? Continuing with the offensive line here, Xavier Newman, who played a lot of the center snaps in this game, he just he looks. I mean, he's been playing these last couple of games, and he looks solid at the center position. And for a team that had a lot of kind of publicity out there early in training camp with the snap issues from Joe Tippmann, I do not believe Xavier Newman's going to kind of beat out Tippmann for a center position by any means. Tippmann is our starter, but if that problem does kind of peek its head up in the middle of the season, and it's something that Jets have to consider. Xavier Newman has shown that he can play the position, and that's saying a lot for this team. Again, this is a team that really has struggled when injuries started to happen. Obviously, the offensive line injuries the last couple years seem to be like some drastic anomaly. With I mean, how many different offensive line combinations we've had, but you're really starting to get the gist that we have a solid front five to start the line, and then we're starting to build a pretty solid second tier line here. Where you got Olu, Xavier Newman, Wes Schweitzer. You want to put Carter Warren, Max Mitchell as your other side tackle, whatever, or your secondary tackle after Olu. As far as a bench replacement, the Jets are starting to kind of really show that they have like a kind of a streamline behind these primary players, and that's something that's going to be really important from as you look at the team through the future. How do they really kind of work this thing out? Because Tyron Smith is here on a 1 year contract. If they bring him back next year, who knows? I think the ideal world would be they have a successful season. Tyron Smith, if he moves out, Olu kind of fits in the left tackle spot, and then kind of work its way from there. Um, but it's very nice to have a pipeline behind, these primary starters, these top, these players that are on 1 year contracts. You want to eventually have like that kind of situation where these guys walk out, and you have a rookie or a second year player right behind them to kind of fill in that gap as you kind of progress. That's how the good teams do it. And I know it's not common for the Jets, but this is something that really I was excited about seeing. Like with the moves they've made this offseason, it wasn't about getting a primary starter in here, throw him into the fire, see what happens, as we've done year in year out in the past. They did the same thing with Will McDonald last year, picking him to be kind of a developmental pass rusher, and here he comes in. This year he's going to get a chance to be one of your primary pass rushers, and we'll see how it goes. But obviously, more on him in a little bit. But we'll keep moving along with the offense. I did a lot of positives here, and now it's time to get to a little bit of the bad. Peasley and Martinez, not as solid in week 2 of the preseason as they were in the first week, obviously. Peasley struggled a bit. There was a couple drives that were Jets just went 3 and out. There wasn't much in the pass game from either of these players. Again, not as solid as it was in the opener of the preseason, but again, these are third and fourth guys. And ideally for the Jets, not even one of these guys your third string quarterback. That title is kind of held for now by Jordan Travis until he eventually gets back from his injury. These are the two guys that we kind of have our eyes on in the meantime, and just not as promising as we saw from the first week. But at the end of the day, you still see them, kind of leading good drives. A couple of drives led by huge returns, helped them get to field goal range right away, and that's basically been the story of the Jets this last game. Was just get the ball in field goal range and trust either Zerline or Cypher to get that kick and drill it. And both kickers did outstanding. Morstead on the punt side did outstanding, as you would come to expect at this point from what we've seen from in the past couple of years. That's all I had for the offense. I'm going to switch over to the defensive side of the ball, and just a lot of praise here from what I'm seeing from the defense. There will be some negatives here that I'll talk about as well. But let's start off with Will McDonald. I mentioned him earlier, a guy Jets brought in as a developmental player. What is he going to become? Is he, a three-down player? Is he a player that's going to, develop it in the Bryce Huff type of frame? And I think that's exactly what we're getting out of Will McDonald. I think he's more taken on the developmental path of Bryce Huff, and we're starting to see a lot of those spin moves kind of working now. I know his first season it was the spin move, and then just like kind of got there late. Last week, spin move got there late, hit the quarterback, roughing the passer. This time it works, and you see the art of it too. It's like he gets in there, he hits that spin move, and doesn't even get grasped by the offensive lineman at all. There's a running back there in pass protection as well, kind of playing up a little bit, so he's able to get right behind him. Running back doesn't even touch him, so he gets through two players on a pass rush move and gets straight to the quarterback for a sack. This is going to be a huge thing for him. Again, this is what he's going to be. He's going to be a guy that the Jets trust late in games. Can you get around that left tackle? Can you get around that right tackle and just get to the quarterback? Can you get through them? That's going to be more of the difficult part. He doesn't show that strength, power that we kind of see in a lot of these outside pass rushers. He just shows that natural speed, and whether that speed is getting around the edge or doing that spin move, kind of luring his way inside. That works against backups. Is it going to work against your top tier, offensive tackles? Going to be a little more difficult, but it's not that it doesn't mean it can't work. But he's going to need to work on his pass rush, his different moves. Because once teams kind of hone in on the fact that this guy's going to do a spin move every so often, we watch out for that. There's going to be things coached on the offensive side for the other teams to try and prevent that from happening when they see him on the field. But with that being said, great to see him get there, get to the quarterback. It's been a pretty stressful offseason for him from the aspect of what's kind of been spit out there, especially with the Hassan Reddick situation going on. A lot of pressure on him to be successful as a pass rusher, because if he's not, God forbid, with this whole situation with Hassan Reddick, fingers gonna be pointing at him. Jets picked him first round last year. He's not developing the way that he should, quote unquote. There's gonna be a lot of like finger pointing at what the issue is. If he would have hit on him, this wouldn't be an issue. So we're just trying to prevent that all from happening. Obviously, good way to fix that problem is get Hassan Reddick signed, so this isn't something that we have to worry about in at all this season. I would love for these players to just develop in as little stress as possible, to develop the right way, and that's really the best recipe for player development. But again, with all that being said, Will McDonald, happy for him to get that sack. Let's get this thing rolling, keep it going next week as well, if the starters play or not. And then obviously, would love to see him get a sack week 1 against Brock Purdy in that opening game. Sticking with defensive line, player that didn't have as successful of a game. It just kind of showing, like, again, going with like developmental like paths. Michael Clemens, when the Jets drafted him, kind of seemed like a player that was, you know, on a good trajectory. I mean, I know he came in as an older player when the Jets drafted him, but powerful player. Thought he would look like a pretty consistent player, and like from a run support standpoint. Um, but I don't know. His development has kind of taken a little turn for the worse from what I've seen. Um, could it turn around? Is it just preseason? Sure. I mean, all those factors can be there, but I don't think we've seen the best version of Michael Clemens in a little bit of time, really since his rookie year. I mean, I think that he's taken a little bit of a drop off last year from what we saw in his first year, and now it's just like in these preseason games against other teams' backups, you still want to see like something, especially when there's a player that's kind of when you're not starters, but when you're high end roster players, you want to see some sort of impact, something. I'm not expecting him to, destroy other players, whatever, and that's just not him, but that's kind of what we saw out of his rookie year. Just a player that gets back there and enforcer on the defensive line. Um, Kind of had that vision of him as being a guy that can slowly develop into what JFM is, the guy that can play on the outside and run plays and kind of fill in on the inside in pass rush situations. I think that's kind of the goal that we all had for him at one point in time. It just hasn't gotten there. Now we're just looking for a guy that can play good run defense, and even that at this point in time isn't showing its isn't appealing its head enough as we would like. So just kind of a little bit of a red flag there. You have one player that's kind of progressing on defensive line, one that's not, and we have a guy on holdout that we would love to get signed at some point to have him in there for the regular season. And then a couple other players that contributed on the defense side of the ball. Um, Quantez Stiggers, he the player that he is really kind of appears to be a player that just gets around the football in many different ways, and he's there all the time. Um, and not only that, he added Gunner to his list of his little tool bag of tricks that he can do. There was a play earlier in the Panthers game where it was Morstead kind of went for the punt. It almost got blocked. It wasn't the greatest of punts. I mean, but still for the fact that it almost got blocked, he still got it back there pretty deep to the 20-yard line. Stiggers comes in there on a situation, just like kind of shoves the guy blocking him into the guy returning the football. I mean, those are little plays that don't seem like much, but um, for for a rookie coming in his first season, high IQ play to make a play like that, really. And I mean, if it wasn't that situation, he still would have been right there to make the tackle anyway. That's what you want to see out of your gunner. Someone get down there, beat the punt to the returner, and he was pretty damn close to getting there. So, um, just high quality player, um, middle round guy you got to be proud for making it to the league in such a different format than what's normally been seen by all these other players. Um, his story has been well documented through the like the fan controlled league, whatever CFL, so on and so forth. Hard for him to make some plays. Um, this next week is going to be another key for him to just kind of keep growing on that. He's definitely making the 53-man roster. There's no doubt about that. But to what extent will he actually be like producing on the field when you have Sauce, Carter, and DJ Reed playing corner? I don't think there's much. He's not a nickel guy either. He'll be one of your outside guys if anything. Um, Jets Jets stick with those guys basically on like 90% of the plays. So if he does come in, it'll be limited reps. So he won't have much opportunities. Getting Figuring out another thing that he can do is very important to him in his career and in his development. And he seems to maybe have found that in as a special teams gunner. And the last player, I just want to give some love to a little bit here, and this is more on the special teams side. Brendan Codrington, you know, not a player that was on all of our kind of radars before this past week, but he put himself on the map really, really quick. Especially as a guy who can maybe make the team as a bubble 53-man guy. Um, if you can contribute on special teams, it's very important. And if you can contribute on kick returns, especially with this new rule in place, which is what he did exactly that in the second week of the preseason. Um, obviously, ways to go, and obviously we don't know what he's been doing in training camp, whether it's been as solid on the kick return game or not, as we've been seeing. But he must be proving something to get on the field behind Isaiah Davis as the kick returner in the first half. Um, so yeah, just again another player, someone that we can really kind of look to, and you're looking for players like this. You're looking for players that you aren't thinking about making the roster. They take a spot for someone else. How do you kind of play that roster gymnastics? That's kind of the art of the 53-man roster a little bit here, and I think Codrington has kind of put himself in that conversation for sure. When teams make a decision, am I going to keep 6 receivers, 7 receivers? Am I gonna keep, 6 corners, 7 corners? That number kinda helps when you have a player that like Codrington that can play on the kick return game, and then a player like Stiggers, again, I don't have a doubt that he's making the 53, but if he was a bubble player, that skill of being a gunner and be able to get down the field is something that especially a guy like Brant Boyer, who's been as our special teams coordinator for quite some time, he has some respect in that building to make calls like this. And obviously, the final call does come to Joe Douglas and Salah, but Boyer's earned his right to be able to kind of, pinpoint those last couple of players that he wants the Jets to keep versus maybe somebody else. So again, Codrington, keep up the good work. Awesome on the kick return. And that's pretty much all I have here. Again, Jets walk away with a victory. They walk away with a clean bill of health, and we are 21 days away from the regular season. One preseason game to go. I'll obviously have another pod as we lead up to that to kind of preview that game, and then we're starting to kind of roll our feet to to the 53-man cut down, and eventually we're almost there to the regular season. Thank you for listening. Appreciate all the help. Again, like I mentioned earlier, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, let's go Jets.